Teamfight Tactics is an auto battler game where in every game there are 8 players. The objective of the game is to build the strongest army possible to beat the other players' armies when you fight them. There are a ton of ways to implement power into your army, or more commonly known as your board, such as items, augments, and unit upgrades, all of which you receive at random but follow specific rules that are true every game. At the highest level, players are the most efficient at building their boards to be the strongest possible by controlling the variance of the game as much as they can. But with that being said, TFT is a game of variance, and variance will occur. Sometimes you'll run into some games where it just doesn't go your way. It's fairly normal, which is why most TFT tournaments run 6 games to try and normalize the variance, but in general, you can expect that in most tournaments, a player with an average placement of a 4 or higher will be able to advance to the next day, and in points, this is usually about 29 points. Now, what if I told you that there was a TFT esports event where in order to potentially advance, you had to score a minimum of 35 points across 5 games instead of 6? Not only that, but inting and forfeiting was the most optimal way to play. There were plenty of bugged units and shop interactions. The patch itself was incredibly unbalanced, and you could often find yourself in a scenario where you are forced to play games that provide zero incentive for you to win, which could take hours. It sounds insane, right? Well, that's what TFT players had to go through for the Set 15 Tacticians trials. But before I absolutely tear into why this was one of the worst competitive esports tournaments ever put together, I want to start with the positives, because there actually were a few. For starters, they had a Discord bot that they built that was very responsive. You could ask it anything about the event and it replied almost instantly. That's a genuinely impressive thing for something handling thousands of players. For another thing, the admins were pretty on point. Despite being fed shit on a plate and bleach in a cup, whenever someone had an issue or a question, they were fast, polite, and doing everything they could to keep things running. And finally, the website itself that was used to automate the lobby seating held up way better than I honestly expected. With how many people were utilizing it, it stayed surprisingly stable for the most part. But that's it, because nothing else about this event was positive. For anyone who doesn't even know what the format was, by the way, let me explain, because Riot was not even that clear about it leading up to the event. Honestly, it was pretty ambiguous. Players from North America, Latin America, and Brazil could all enter. There was no ranked requirement. You just had to be 13 or older, which I don't even know how they even verify. Every 30 minutes, a new on-demand tournament started with 24 players. Each one ran 3 rounds, 5 games total. Only your best result from one single tournament each day counted towards the leaderboard. The top 28 players from each day qualified for the cup for a total of 56 qualifying players. So for example, let's say you queue up and get placed into a bracket. Within your bracket, there are 24 players, split into 3 separate lobbies to play 2 games. And then after those 2 games, the top 16 move on. Those 16 players then play 2 more games, and then the top 8 move on. Finally, the top 8 play one last game. You get 8 points for first, 7 points for second, etc. All the way down to 1 point for an 8th. The total score from that run is what shows up on the leaderboard. If you are dropped at any point, you are allowed to re-queue to try to enter the tournament again from a different bracket. So hearing all of this, what's the problem? Because there's no ranked requirement, you can end up in the same bracket as gold ranked Jimmy John, who's never touched competitive TFT before. So depending on the seeding, you can sometimes, as the highest ranked challenger player, get put in a lobby when there's a player who has no idea what the hell they're doing. There's no competitive integrity in that. This in turn can cause people to have already large head starts with their scores, but that is just the beginning. The no ranked requirement also meant that there was a large quantity of players playing in the tournament, over 1,200 registered users to be exact. That means that in order to qualify for a separate cup, which was the only incentive of this whole event, you had to be in the top 56 out of 1,200 plus players who signed up. And spoiler alert, you cannot make a competitive open event with over 1,000 players and expect to accurately boil that down to the most skillful top 56 players. Now that also means that if you bot 2 in any of your games, your bracket run is already over. You're mathematically out. So what's the best move? Well, let's say you just played your very first game in your bracket and went 7th, and you're stuck in the same lobby and you want to re-queue to get a better tournament run. Well, then for your second game, you do not play well. It is optimal to play worse to guarantee that you're allowed to leave the bracket to join a new queue. So that's right. The optimal strategy in this competitive event is to lose faster and harder than anyone else in your bracket. And then that actually happened on day 1. And then on day 2, players were then banned for it, despite the fact that if you just played normally and played competitively, there was no reward, despite the fact that it was in your best competitive interest to run it down. Coupled with the fact that you could be held hostage to play more games that provided zero incentives, besides giving yourself less time to re-queue and get a better score. The format was designed to punish players the most who still do well despite potentially a poor performance early. Now, under normal circumstances, getting banned for playing worse would be fair. After all, it's supposed to be a competition, but forfeiting was the correct strategy. The format literally incentivized you to quit early if you were bot 4. Staying in just wasted your time and made you less likely to qualify overall. And it doesn't help that the word on the street is that some of these bans were decided based on an individual's stream. As in, allegedly, admins were checking players' Twitch streams to confirm whether they were inting or forfeiting because, again, that was the most optimal strategy based on the format of the event. So if you were streaming the event to help promote it, to show the trials to your community, or maybe you're just a TFT streamer yourself participating, your stream could actually be used as evidence against you. It was possible that you were more likely to be punished for giving the event exposure. It's completely backwards. You're supposed to want people to stream your event, not scare them out of it. And don't forget that if you're caught intentionally playing poor, you might get banned from future sets. Not sure if that's happening though, because as every time someone tried to ask what the penalties specifically were, they were met with ambiguous answers. This means that if you were playing in the bracket with middling scores, it's possible to be held hostage as early as game 2. Let's use my own personal experience as an example. In my first game, I took auto farming and hit the worst 5 cost in the game, Twisted Fate, and went 8th. I am mathematically out at this point. There is zero incentive as to why I should stay in this bracket or waste my time being here, but I know that I'm committed to playing at least one more game. That's the format, and I'm not trying to be banned competitively. Fair enough, I'll play through that second game, no problems. So I played the second game in a 7-player lobby, by the way, because one person already dipped. Sorry, no repercussions for that guy because they don't have a stake in competitive TFT. And I went 4th. Probably not playing the most optimal TFT, but I still played at a passable level because honestly, who fucking cares at this point? I've no incentive to try and play better. So after 2 games, my average was a 6. But then it turns out that wasn't enough. I should have intentionally played worse because I accidentally qualified to play in the next round with 16 players. So now I'm stuck for another hour and a half playing in 2 TFT games, which again have zero incentive for me to do well. So what do? I hard force Janna reroll games 3 and 4 while playing RuneScape, and then what happens? I hit 92 mining, and then I went 1st and 2nd in each game respectively on accident. Great competitive format, by the way. So now I'm forced to go into the last lobby. Despite that, again, I have zero incentive to do well at all because of this stupid format. So to close out this wonderful bracket, I got to play in a 5-man trainer golem lobby on Sunday alone. The time it took to play the 4 games I was forced to play with zero incentive to win, the downtime between games, including the time that the queue system was down, which we'll get to in a second, I wasted 4 hours and 15 minutes. I even set up a timer at one point because I wanted to keep track of how long this shit was taking. And that was just my personal experience alone. Not to mention the experience of the other 1,200 players who for the most part had very similar, if not more, frustrating experiences. And don't forget how on Sunday, the queuing system just collapsed. You finished your bracket, you hit requeue, and then you got stuck. There were some players who were stuck in a queue for over an hour. Nobody could get into new games. Some people sat there staring at the screen doing nothing and couldn't leave in case it got fixed, which eventually it did get fixed. And thankfully, they got on it. But it took about an hour to fully stabilize. And to compensate, they created an extra bracket an hour later, which by the way, had I personally rented down my second game in the earlier anecdote, rather than trying to maintain the competitive integrity of the event, I would have actually been able to re-queue to have a final shot at the cup. Too bad that using the system in a way that is supposed to support a player's competitive interest is not fucking allowed. And by the way, remember how this competition is open to America, Latin America, and for Brazil? Well, guess what? If you speak Spanish and you can't speak any English, good fucking luck. It doesn't help that the Latin American players especially struggled because communication was rough. And while there were some Spanish-speaking admins, it was not enough support for the players as players felt frustrated by the lack of support for Spanish speakers. People would ask questions in Spanish and get responses back in Portuguese. So when you put it all together, players were frustrated, confused, and tilted out of their minds. Half the players who were still technically in the tournament didn't even care anymore in their bracket. And you could see the decay happening in real time. People straight up didn't give a fuck and would rather risk the penalties than play in this shit format. Lobbies dropped from 8 players to 7. Often 6, and on rare occasion we even saw 4-player lobbies. 4-player TFT lobbies in a supposedly high-level cup qualifier. What's some more anecdotal evidence? On day 1, I personally played in an 8-player lobby, followed by 4 6-player lobbies. In that same run, by the way, only myself and 1 other player could potentially make it to the cup. That meant that the other 6 players in our lobby, which again ended up being 4 because 2 straight up fucking dipped, could have theoretically gone home because it was a waste of their time. The final lobby I was in could have been a 1v1 and I wouldn't even blame them. And again, because of the lack of consequences and players just not giving a fuck anymore, just look at this clip from Shoma's stream. Now, in case you are watching this in the future, you don't know what happened, or maybe you just forget what Crystal Gambit is, Shoma, the player streaming, got his cash out griefed by a player forfeiting on purpose, and this alone ruined Shoma's entire bracket run. All of this, by the way, is being played on one of the worst patches of TFT we've had the entire set. I won't go too into detail, but the Star Guardians comp was way over the line in terms of strength, so you had 2 to 4 players contesting Star Guardians every single game, and any other line is significantly worse unless you have a very high roll spot for it. And then let's not forget the amount of bugs happening, where you could get stuck with a shop with 5 Kog'Maws in it that you can't escape, you could lose shop slots on your roll down, the Immortal Rammus bug where you couldn't die, the whole 2-1 tailorable augment drama where a few pro players found out augments were tailorable on 2-1, where there's no mention of it by Riot, just for Riot to then hotfix it without saying anything 24 hours before the cup, 48 hours before the trials, just for them to then revert the hotfix because the pro players who did find out would be forced to readjust to a different meta and lose a competitive edge that they worked for days on. Trader Golem could spot in with Shitter Nikos as its emblems. Pot of Gold was on rare occasion back in the game despite that there was already a portal. Mighty Mech's large cast was bugged and sometimes couldn't hit units that were 4 hexes away, and just more that I just can't even list off the top of my head. So let's wrap it up. What was all of the major issues at this event? 1. A format that incentivized soft inting and forfeiting, which compromised competitive integrity. 2. Punishments for players that try to utilize the system for their best competitive advantage without any clarity on what said punishments would be. 3. Allegedly using player streams to confirm if players were soft inting or forfeiting due to the format of the event, de-incentivizing players to even stream or promote the event in the first place. Number 4, a structure that required a high level of commitment and responsibility from a group of players, where due to an open format and no rank restriction, the majority of said group has no incentive in maintaining the integrity of the event due to either lack of punishment or lack of personal commitment to the esport as a whole. Number 5, an unstable queue system. Number 6, a format that completely randomizes how difficult or easy your bracket will be, meaning it's possible to have a bracket where you are fighting some of the best players in a region, or having a bracket where there's nobody higher than Masters, which competitively is unfair. Number 7, no rank restriction means that a large quantity of players ended up playing in these events, causing the average required to advance significantly more luck-based than skill-based. If we're being completely honest, if Jimmy John and Gold wants to experience competing, they can compete on ladder, because that clearly is an environment that is competitive enough for them. Number 8, no system in place to alleviate issues when players drop out, causing 7, 6, 5, or even 4-man lobbies. Number 9, the patch the tournament was played on was a terrible patch that was both severely unbalanced and extremely buggy. Number 10, you had to wait up to 15 minutes for everyone to be ready between games, and to be completely honest, within a few minutes you could already tell who was going to show up to the next lobby and who just wasn't coming back. This made the time between games significantly longer than it had to be. This needs to be cut down to 5 minutes max unless you get permission from an admin due to having to take a shit or something. Based on the responsiveness of the admins, this should be a very realistic and easy to implement fix. Number 11, for a lot of folks, this was their first taste of competitive TFT esports, and you shat in their mouth multiple times. These people now have a worse impression of TFT esports as a whole, who could have been people who want to support and partake in the system instead. And number 12, the fact that this format even got fucking greenlit. I'm gonna be brutally honest because I'm not great at sugarcoating things, and also somebody just has to say it. There's a baseline of competency that's expected from a massive company like Riot Games for creating events like these. And yes, while it was announced that it is an experimental product and headaches are in fact expected, the level of incompetency to propose and greenlight this format is indicative of a team that cannot produce quality work due to their inability to foresee how easily players can abuse the system for a competitive advantage. The players saw how abusable forfeiting and soft inting would be from a mile away, and I do not understand how the people behind this had no idea. This is not an attack, it's purely an observation. Because if this is the quality we can expect moving forward for future official competitive events, then there is no future for TFT esports. In conclusion, the trials format wasn't competitive, fair, or fun. It was a high variance, low control test of who could high roll the hardest and queue the fastest, with a format that incentivized soft inting, not trying your best, holding players hostage for hours, all while pretending that the format itself is competitive. Competitive TFT deserves better than this. The players who grind all season to qualify deserve better than this, and the community that genuinely loves this game and wants to see it grow deserves better than this. Riot Games, you need to do better.